Okay. Well, hello everyone, and welcome to those who are attending live or those who might be watching later. I am Caleb Hale. I'm the Director of Communications for the SIU Alumni Association. And I have with me today a couple of special guests. And what we're talking about today is some of the similarities that the class of 1970 and the class of 2020 actually share in the fact that both of them are kind of have the dubious honor of having their uh, last year of college be interrupted by world events. Of course, in the case of 2020, the COVID-19 pandemic, which comes with its array of civil unrest and other issues out there, but also I've got from the class of 1970. Someone probably who many of you recognize, Glen Poshard. 1970 and the years leading up to that were a time of some pretty big turmoil, not only nationally, internationally, but it kind of manifested here in Carbondale as well, leading to pretty much an emergency shutdown of campus right before the graduation that year was to take place. So I wanted to take a moment and let our 2020 representatives briefly introduce themselves, and then I'll let Glenn introduce himself as well. So Josie, do you want to start? And I'll let you know that you are on mute just in case you start in.
Yeah, just to be safe. Hi, so my name is Josie and I graduated in May of 2020 and I did a dual degree through SIU. So I got a Bachelor of Science with a major in advertising and minor in marketing, and then Bachelor of Arts with a major in Spanish and a minor in sign language.
Okay, Luis?
Hello, my name is Louis Prado, and I graduated in May as well with a Bachelor's of Science in Geography and Environmental Resources with a focus on GIS. And I'm now attending SIU's graduate school focusing on environmental sustainability.
Okay, and Dr. Poshard from our 1970s class.
I'm Glen Poshard. I graduated with my bachelor's degree from SIU in 1970. Went on to get my master's and doctorate degree from SIU over the years, and was very honored to have served on the SIU Board of Trustees, and eventually became president of the university system, and was very grateful for that honor also.
All right. Well, let's just start with what it was like early this year, the things we remember most fresh in our mind with 2020. Luis, Josie, I'll let you guys jump in there, but you know, it became clear probably right after spring break that the university couldn't continue operating in person as it had been. But as someone who's kind of bearing down on the very end of their college career, there's a lot of expectations as to what is going to happen and then what's going to happen from that. What was that like necessarily to kind of have all that disrupted? All of a sudden, you're thrown back home a little bit earlier. All your classes are, you know, in forums that you weren't expecting. What's kind of that situation like?
Do you want to go first?
Yeah.
Sure. So, I mean, honestly, I'm very grateful for technology being able to just let us continue on our classes. I remember it was spring break, and right away, most students were like, wow, we got another week of spring break while we figure out what's going on. And we just figured we'd figure it out, maybe. And what happened was that switch over to online, and it was strange. But I mean, I feel very grateful for the experience compared to what school might have looked like being stopped because of issues that generations before me had to deal with, between the Vietnam War and the civil rights movements in the 1960s. Not to say that there aren't some incredible injustices to tackle still today, because there are. But I'm grateful for the experience that I've been able to have compared to the struggles that I'm not sure I can imagine a young man going through in the 1970s.
Okay. Josie, what was it like with you in terms of getting kind of acclimated to a new reality for you, but then this strange new reality that you pretty much had to account for everywhere you went?
Right. Well, in the school aspect of things, I definitely liked being busy. And so it was kind of different when, for me, I was a resident assistant and things there got kind of switched up on what are we going to do to make sure everyone's safe. Or as a tour guide, we're not giving tours in the same way we were anymore. But like Louie said, definitely thankful for the online because there were so many groups that got together. And even like my college, we did a virtual graduation, and even though it's not the big ceremony that everyone initially thinks of when they, think of the college ceremony, it was still something that meant a lot. And the fact that people could still kind of put that together just, on a whim. And that was really nice. So I am thankful for that as well.
Okay. And Dr. Poshard, obviously in 1970, absolutely none of this online stuff was possible at that point. But also it was, there were a different set of circumstances that kind of arose to what happened to shut down SIU that spring as well. And I was wondering if you give us the short history lesson of what it was like during that spring semester.
Well, I can try, Caleb. Coming out of the 1950s, where there were lines of demarcation that really defined our society, where you had male on one side and female on the other, and white on one side and black on the other, and so on. The students of the 60s meant to throw all of those things off. So you had prominent on the campuses, as well as throughout the country. You had the civil rights movement that wanted to smash that line. You had the women's movement, because in the 60s, the major jobs for women were secretaries, bookkeepers, teachers, and that was about it. And that line needed to be smashed, and so students took up that cause. You had the environmental movement, you had labor movement, you had all of these movements going on in the 60s that determined the societal changes that needed to expand democracy. On top of that, we got engaged in the Vietnam War. And that became the single greatest problem for students in our country. Because many saw it as an unjust war. We were acting under our obligations under the Southeast Asia Treaty Organization. Eventually, we built up to over 500,000 people over there in Vietnam, and the students took up the cause to end that war. Here at SIU, we had a Vietnamese Studies Center that was in Woody Hall. We had the Air Force ROTC that was over in Wheeler Hall. And both of those became the focal point of the student protests because it was the military industrial complex imposing itself on a university. And the students hated that. And then in 1969, we reinstated the draft. And, instating the draft at a time when an unpopular war is going on just incited the students all the more. So all of these cataclysmic kinds of things came together in the spring of 1970. We had student protests for the past 2 years, getting worse and worse. Just to tell you, when I think this whole thing, I at least saw it as never ending, and the university couldn't handle it. My wife was in Altgeld Hall in a music class. This is in the end of January 1970. And I was waiting on the steps for her. And there were 2,000 kids marching up from the library up the street, and they took over Woody Hall. And they went in and they started throwing out typewriters and smashing windows and all kinds of stuff. And I knew right then that we were never going to survive this. And so there was clashes by the police and students at protests all over campus. It got worse and worse, and the board finally voted in early May to suspend the campus. It was a pretty tragic period of time.
And I think the flashpoint that really started everything was obviously
Yes.
with the killings of those 4 students there.
Yes. Yeah.
So
Kent State
for
was a big part.
Josie and Luis, those are obviously those are a very different set of circumstances that kind of led up to eventually closing the campus at all. But Dr. Schroeder, I mean, how did all this kind of personally affect you in terms of just your personal college experience? I mean, what kind of mark did it leave? You didn't necessarily get to finish as you planned for your undergrad degree.
Well, it became a destabilizing time for the entire economy. The 70s, even beginning in the early 70s, immediately after I graduated, um, we had the worst recession we'd had since the Depression. I mean, interest rates, as a part of the inflation at that time, interest rates went to 18 to 20%. I had hoped to get a job right after graduating, in my profession, and I couldn't even look at buying a home or anything like that because you could buy a brand new home for $33,000, but who could afford to pay 18 to 20% interest rates? And the jobs that were so prevalent even during the 60s were folding. I mean, in this inflationary period, we had an OPEC. 12 nations refused to sell oil. The price of gasoline in this country quadrupled overnight. So for people just graduating in the middle of this stock market crash in 73 and 74, we had all kinds of problems. I couldn't get the job I wanted. I immediately started graduate school as a way to keep busy. I went to work in a grocery store. I went to work bussing tables in a bar, in a restaurant. I did other things to keep my work history and work record, up to date. I didn't want to try to eventually get into the job that I had dreamed about and have an employer look at me and say, well, what have you been doing the last couple of years? Sitting on your hands, So I took anything I could find just to keep working. But a lot of dreams were delayed during that period of time. And really, we didn't get the jobs we were looking for until maybe 3-4 years later. But, we didn't defer the dream.
So Josie, Luis, does any of this sound familiar to you and what you experienced at the moment? Can you tell me a little bit about I know, Josie, you do have a job lined up, but it doesn't start till January. So you have had a bit more of a break than you planned. But what is that like going out there and knowing that, there's this huge global event wrecking the economy, wrecking any chance that I might have of finding some stable work? What was that journey like?
I'm very grateful that I was able to come back home, especially for me. I'm someone that likes to be extremely busy and I like to be doing a ton and I love to be seeing people and be social. And so, when everyone's saying to stay at home and stuff, that was something that was a little bit, difficult for me at first to adjust to, but then, just kind of finding other things to do and keep the time busy and applying to places was a little bit different because there were so many places that were either temporarily closed or just weren't hiring just because they couldn't afford to do that at the time. So I was very lucky eventually when I did get a job that I had wanted, and it has just been weird because I have the job, but it starts in January and I've known about it for a couple months. So up until then, I've just been kind of waiting around, ready for it to start.
And Luis, you've gone on to grad school. Was that part of the plan originally, or did that change because of what has happened now? And tell me a little bit about your post-college worries and experience.
Yes, absolutely. I'm grateful to be here at SIU and be employed by SIU through my graduate studies here. But this pandemic has forced the United States to take a really hard look, a really hard reflection at the system that we're a part of, and it's terrifying. My girlfriend graduated with 2 degrees, and she has not been able to find a job in her field because we're living through a pandemic right now. And it is very scary. I think what's happened to a lot of folks during this pandemic is analogous to there's a lot of folks that I know of who, when you're in a room, they can't be in a room by themselves without their phone. and without some technology, just alone by themselves with their thoughts. And folks in my generation who can't do it. And it's, you know, and a generation being told throughout our whole lives, school system, love yourself and accept yourself, and not really given tools to do that. Maybe told to buy some stuff. Thanks, capitalism. But when we're there by ourselves with our own thoughts, just with ourselves, without anything else, we're forced to do some reflecting. And the distractions are gone. What we start feeling right there in that moment, places that need healing, some wounds that we're just distracted from all the time. We're always on the go. And that's part of what meditation can do, can help people start healing. And what happened during this pandemic is the United States was forced to put their phone down for a second. Now, ironically, I think we probably picked our phones up a little bit more.
Right.
But all the distractions of social obligations and the drive to and from work, it was all gone. And so many folks were forced to take a second and take a hard look at what the United States really looks like. And a lot of the issues that are a part of the systems that we live in right now were just exposed and highlighted. And I do think that it helped 2020 was an election year, because that'll help with the highlighting. But I think that's a lot of what I see this pandemic has done for people my age, at least.
All right. And Dr. Poshard, so much of this probably seems familiar. I mean, we're hitting a lot of the same beats in 2020 that we were hitting in the 1970s. So, and why is it kind of, in your opinion, I mean, do we kind of keep hitting these kind of repeats on things? And, you know, what does it mean 50 years later, we're kind of experiencing some of the same things that you experienced? And wouldn't you think, obviously you thought, even you probably thought, surely at some point 50 years in the future, we'd be beyond some of these issues, but we're not necessarily.
Well, we're not beyond them. I think democracy is a verb. It's not a noun. And we're always going to be in this state of flux when it comes to trying to broaden the base for democracy, including more and more people, you know, whether it's economically or socially or politically. This country is not perfect. It's not where it needs to be, but it's a lot farther along than many countries in the world. And I guess what I would say to young people today is, don't panic during this time. You know, it's not a time for panic. Be resilient. This economy is going to come back. There will be a brand new economy come back because of COVID. Believe me, every time a major problem like this hits our country, because of our ingenuity, because of our free enterprise system, because of our entrepreneurship, people will find new ways to create new jobs. So I would say to young people, you know, we're not perfect. We're getting there despite all the chaos. You know, the country's never been just black and white. It's always been in flux to bring more and more people in. So that's where we are. That's where we'll always be as America. What we can't afford to do is dwell out on the extremes where people hate each other rather than trying to find the middle ground where we can come together and compromise. So America, the German philosopher Nietzsche once said, you must have chaos in order to give birth to a dancing star. Well, that's kind of the way I see the country. It's always been chaotic, but we're always broadening the base through that chaos. What I would say is be resilient. If you're not able to get a job right now, remember that your first job, it isn't forever anyway. You're going to change jobs many times during your lifetime if you're a young person today just graduating from college. So a new economy will emerge. I think Luis hit upon one thing, though, that's really important. you need to learn to take care of yourself during this time where you're experiencing this sense of loss of the camaraderie, of not being able to be with your friends, with your family, these sort of things. So you know, take care of yourself, exercise, find counselors that can sit down with you. You know, it is a time of self-exploration because we have the time to look inside now a little bit more than we would if we had a 10-hour-a-day job and we were rushing through life all the time. So I think that's a really good point. But don't give up your dream plan for life. Don't lose focus of that. You can opt out and take some things temporarily to keep the work history up and that sort of thing. You can find something that fits for now, but don't give up that long range dream, because we'll come back, the economy will come back, the country will come back, it'll be better in the end for what we're going through, and just hold on to that dream. That's what I want to encourage you to do.
And on that, Josie, what in learning through this, you, as someone who said they like to keep busy going through this, what kind of order have you been able to discern from the chaos of these last few months? What have you been able to kind of do for yourself that you might not have otherwise done because you launched right into, you know, a career or a job?
Right. Yeah, it gives you a lot of time when, you know, at first I was just like sleeping in every day and stuff and watching a lot of TV. And then it was like, okay, I can't be doing this long term. Like, this isn't the way for me. So finding things like I go on a walk every day now, and, you know, like getting like that person that you can talk to, and working on your mental health, working on your physical health, and also just being aware of everything else going on in the world. And for me, it was a lot of kind of realizing what privileges I do have right now, especially during all this, being able to come back home and not have a job until January and that be okay. Like, I'm very grateful for that. And there's just so many things going on in the world, and taking this time to educate yourself on stuff that you had no idea about before, you didn't realize how big things were before. So I've been doing a lot of kind of self-work through all this.
Right. And Luis, you brought up some stuff that what kinds of things, what kind of order have you been able to put together from the chaos?
It helps to be so busy as a student and a TA and really dedicating myself to this, but it also gives me a lot of time to be a great dog owner.
Good for you.
And it's given me a lot of time to, I live with my girlfriend and my two dogs and really learn what quality time means. And man, do I miss people. I'm such an extrovert, and I'm so excited when I get to hug my buddies again and see all my family. My family would have it's very cultural. I think my Mexican family would have just get-togethers every week, and all the uncles and cousins and my dad and all. I miss all of them.
Sure.
And I think through this, I know I'm not alone, and just being excited to get back to it and be around all my friends and family again, and it makes me grateful of it.
Right. Well,
You know,
as 2020 is, you know, it was a bad year for many people, all of us, but as you said, for everyone's dog, it was the best freaking year ever.
that's
For as many
probably
people have
true.
been home.
You know, Caleb, listening to Louise and Josie, I remember when I graduated, there was a massive rush to join like AmeriCorps and the Peace Corps and service areas like this, because jobs were scarce. And those niches were filled by students just graduating who couldn't immediately go into their dream job, you know. And those kinds of things are still available to students today too, if they want to take that time to get in a service corps of some sort.
Right. And, you know, I see within the pandemic and the time that it has given a lot of people to reflect. I don't think we would have been able to have some of the actual groundswell of introspection and the call for change that we did over the summer, especially with regard to race relations, in the way,
Yeah.
you know, it really is systemic. throughout there. I don't think that time for introspection would have been there without this. So you have to take, the good with the bad on everything. Obviously, yeah, having a global pandemic wreak havoc on people's personal lives, on the economy, and on world security as it is bad enough. But I think it gave everyone that time to be introspective and to actually start what I see what you hope might be some actual steps toward genuine change in this time period. And I think what I've been able to learn myself is I've gotten to spend way more time with my kids this past year. And as we were talking earlier about it before we went live, my kids are 15 and 12 right now, and you kind of realize just how much time you actually haven't been with them and have lost when you're otherwise at work, things like that. But as I've told my kids, they're doing a lot of homeschooling right now from work. I've told my kids, unfortunately, they've shattered the concept of a snow day. The infrastructure is there from here on out to be able to just remote learn from where they are. So I wanted to give everyone an opportunity to offer any closing thoughts as we close out here on this conversation. Luis, I can start with you if you have any other final thoughts.
I just really appreciate this opportunity to have this conversation, and I've been given some hope from Dr. Poshard today. Thank you so much. I think it was what I needed to hear from you. So thank you. I think a lot of young folks could use some more hope, and hold on to that hope and just keep fighting through, because we're going to make it and everything's going to be okay. And it's important to remember that. It really is important. So thank you.
Right, Josie, as you're prepared for that, you get your last holidays and then you start in your position, but what are your final thoughts?
I would also agree with Louis that I do really appreciate what Dr. Poshard said about the resilience. That was kind of my word throughout this year, and that's what was written on my graduation cap. Just, seeing the light at the end of the tunnel and looking for the good and the bad and trying your best to kind of keep pushing through things that seem tough, and, definitely taking time to focus on mental health and whatever people need to do during this time to kind of keep themselves safe and keep others safe.
Okay. Dr. Poshard, I'll give you the final.
Well, Caleb, here's the thing that I would say is that as I've been listening to Louis and Josie, these are the caliber of students that we have at SIU. I'm not worried at all about this next generation assuming leadership and taking this country where it needs to go. I've just really appreciated listening to the two of you today. And I guess I would leave you with just this one thought. Tom Brokaw wrote a book on my father's generation. He called it The Greatest Generation. I don't think it is. I think your generation is going to be the greatest generation because of your resilience, of your versatility, of your intellectual prowess, which I think is astounding today. But I want to leave you with one other thing. My wife and I run a foundation for abused children. When we first started this back in 1999, we had about 20 cars line up in front of the SIU Student Center every Saturday morning at about 7 o'clock. It was all students. They drove 60 miles to Cairo in their own cars and worked 12 hours a day until we finished a $700,000 shelter for abused women and children. Those are the greatest kids. And young people say to me today, this younger generation this younger generation that. Are you kidding me? Your generation is one of the greatest generations already because you're so willing to help each other. You're so willing to help build this country. I don't have any fear that SIU is turning out the very best right now. And you guys and your generation, you're going to be the best generation. I guarantee you. I see it in your heart and I know it in your head. So hang in there.
All right. Yeah, I would say I think your generation is going to be the one that finally melts away a lot of the the old ways that
I agree.
kind of seem to persist and hang on. Of course, that means you're going to open up a whole new bevy of challenges and thoughts and everything else as you go along. And one day, inevitably, you're going to be old enough to be the ones that kind of hang on to ideas that are maybe past their time. But that's the natural cycle of life. And I thank you to everyone here. I was glad we were able to put together this kind of multi-generational conversation today to just kind of offer everyone a little bit of insight as to how things are the same, but how things are progressing nonetheless.
Right.
So everyone, thank you for your time today. Appreciate it. And I hope you have a happy holidays and obviously a much better 2021 than it's been 2020.
Every challenge is an opportunity. It's nice
Thank you very
meeting you
much, everyone.
guys.
Goodbye.
Thanks, Caleb. Nice meeting you, Louis. Nice meeting you, Josie.
Nice meeting you too. Thank you for this opportunity.
Okay, thank you.
Have a good day.
Bye-bye.